D&D number 11, Circle of Life. In Jesus' name, Part 3, Chapter 12. It's October 31st, 3:30 p.m., Thursday afternoon, New York School of Dance, Los Angeles campus. Taylor stood at the bar as instructed. A young girl, about the same age as Taylor, spoke as she grabbed Taylor's hips and brought them into alignment. Your flexibility is surprisingly pretty good for someone just learning to dance, the girl said, but you can't let your hip ride up like that. She pushed it down. See the difference? Taylor nodded. Yes, I see. Thanks. But my flexibility shouldn't be a surprise. Why not? Well, because I'm a keno, and we're martial artists, and flexibility is key in martial arts. The girl stood back and looked her over. Good grief, you're Taylor Keno. I'm sorry. When Madame Janine asked me to come in here and help you get stretched out, she didn't tell me who you were. She just said you're a new student that she's going to be giving private lessons to. So you're a student here or a teacher? Taylor asked. I'm a senior student. Oh, what's your name? I'm Jenny, she said with a slight smile. It's nice to meet you, Jenny. How long have you been studying? Since I was 5, so that would be 13 years. What about you? Taylor frowned. I've never been taught dance. But didn't I see you dance on America Can Dance? Yeah, but that's just because my boyfriend went viral on social media when we did a dance for his prom and for a friend's wedding. They wanted to take advantage of people wanting to tune in to see us dance. But you were great. You didn't look untrained. You looked like a pro. Well, now I know you're just being kind. I am never kind. Taylor giggled. I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, I love to dance, but I didn't know how much I loved it until recently. And then Miss Caroline said it was never too late and told me to come here. Miss Caroline, are you talking about Madam Smith, the owner of the school? Oh, yeah. The Nashes are friends of the family. Miss Caroline is about one of the sweetest people I've ever known, and she took mine and Gabe's wedding dance and made it awesome. Yeah, and let's talk about that, Gabe. I mean, the guy is totally hot. You are so lucky. Taylor nodded. Funny. I've known him my whole life, but never really noticed him until this year. And you're right. I'm lucky to have him. So, are you guys, like, totally in love? Taylor grinned. Totally. Well, I guess I'd better get you all stretched out and warmed up before Madame Janine gets in here. Taylor nodded. Okay, but I do have to clarify one thing. My flexibility is not just pretty good. It's great. Oh, really? Jenny said. Well, let's just see about that. Do everything I do, or try to. Taylor nodded. You're on. Jenny went to the floor and went down in a front split. Taylor followed effortlessly. Jenny changed legs. Taylor did too. Jenny went into a side split. Taylor did too. Jenny lifted her arms above her head and bent forward, touching her nose to the floor. Taylor did too, but also touched her navel to the floor, her back perfectly straight. Jenny tried hard to stump her, but flexibility-wise, Taylor was at the top of the game. Still, Jenny did have to correct her form, and Taylor humbly accepted that help. They both looked up when Madame Janine finally entered the room. They immediately got to their feet. Taylor smiled at the woman and bowed, which made Janine's eyebrows shoot up. You don't have to bow to me. Oh, Taylor said, obviously embarrassed. I'm so sorry. It's just habit. Jenny looked at Taylor with an air of authority. We don't bow, but we do curtsy. So, Janine began, I see you and Miss Taylor have become acquainted, and since Jenny is almost smiling, I'm guessing the two of you will eventually be close friends. When Taylor looked confused, Janine went on to explain. I sent Jenny in here to stretch you out to see how either of you would handle each other. With you being a latecomer and a celebrity, I thought Jenny might look down on you. And with you being a celebrity, you might look down on her. It was a bit of a test. Excuse me, Madame Janine, but I have to stop you and correct you. I am not a celebrity. My mom and dad, yes. Me? No. Noted, Janine said, and then went on. And since Jenny, who hates everybody, is smiling, I'm going to assume that she, at the very least, can tolerate you or already has some respect for you or, at the very most, actually likes you. Taylor giggled. You hate everybody? Jenny shrugged. Usually. But you are very disarming and you have an honesty about you that I like. And you don't think you're all that. And you have confidence even though you've never taken dance. And even though you've been on America Can Dance, you were humble about it. And to be honest, it doesn't hurt that Madam Smith is friends with your family because I wouldn't want to disappoint Madam Smith. Well, Taylor said, I hope that eventually you will only like me because I'm me and not because of who I know. Well, we'll just have to see about that, Jenny said coyly. Okay, Taylor, let's get started, Janine said. We will begin with the absolute basics and work our way up from there. However, I have to be able to see your body so that I can see the alignment. So you must remove the sweats and the t-shirt. Taylor eyed the woman. She was young, maybe in her late 20s. She had blonde hair up in a bun and wore a blue leotard with white tights and pink ballet shoes. Taylor herself had on a black leotard and black tights, covered with a thick pair of sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt. She quickly removed her outer clothing, revealing a tight, well-muscled body. Well, you may be a dance beginner, but obviously your body is not unfamiliar with physicality. Do you work out, or do you do what your parents do? Well, yes, ma'am, I work out because I'm a martial artist like my father, not my mother. She nodded. Come to the bar. Jenny, you stay and help me to demonstrate. Yes, ma'am, Jenny said. Taylor followed her new dance teacher to the bar. There are 5 basic positions, Janine began. New scene. It's still October 31st. It's 6:30 p.m. Thursday at the Gabe Tanner Community Center in Pine Forest, Georgia. Rose smiled at Lena as her friend arrived back at the center. She'd given kids horses rides all afternoon and then loaded Sugar and Rocky and taken them back to the ranch. She promised she'd be back to help with the rest of the festivities, and she was true to her word. Hey, girl, glad you made it back. Why? Something go wrong? Nope, just always good to see you. So, have you heard from Jake lately? She shook her head. Not really. I mean, he called a few nights ago, but he had to end the call suddenly, and I haven't heard from him since then. Rose sighed. I'm sure he's okay. I am too, Lena said. Well, you're a stronger person than I am, Bugs. I don't know how you do it. Well, I'm not that strong, but I have a lot to keep me occupied. So, how's your mom doing? She's hanging in there. How's your mom? You know, she had a whole lot of morning sickness in the beginning, and I thought this is going to be a nightmare, but now that's gone, and she seems fine. She's getting huge, but she hasn't had many problems at all. Maybe it's because she's used to carrying twins. Maybe. Lena looked around at the packed center. Most of the people she didn't even recognize, which meant they were reaching a lot of people from outside of town. So, what can I help you with? Well, let's see. You can go check on see if Miss Rebecca needs any more candy for the trick-or-treaters. You can go in the gym and check on all the game booths. Lily and Daisy might need some help there. Or you can check on Violet to see if she's ready for the little show she and the kids have prepared. And you can help with any of the other games. Like there's a mean version of adult musical chairs going on. Lena laughed. That sounds like fun. How about I go do all of those things? I'll start with Mrs. Murphy and work my way around. Thanks, Bugs. Oh. Oh, what? Oh, don't turn around. But there's the guy I told you about, Jericho Jones. I invited him, but I didn't think he'd show. She looked him over quickly. He wore olive drab pants with his work boots. His shirt was also olive drab. It was buttoned down, short-sleeved, and had some kind of bright red insignia on the breast. A U.S. flag patch on the right shoulder, another patch on the left shoulder, which she couldn't make out, and several smaller patches on both breasts. Well, can I turn and look at him or not? 'Cause I really want to see if he looks as good as you said. Well, wait until he approaches and speaks, and then you can look at him. Lena giggled. New scene, or actually just a new point of view, same scene. Jericho Jones saw her as he approached the doors of the center. The beautiful blonde was standing in the center of the lobby, speaking with a beautiful redhead. Must be something in the water, because he'd seen several gorgeous females since he'd been here in Pine Forest. He'd had several meetings, and he was tired and hungry, but wasn't going to forget the invitation to stop by the Gabe Tanner Center to see what they have going on. Of course, he'd be looking at it from a different point of view, but still, he did want to catch another glimpse of Rose Anderson. He glanced at the small decal on the glass door. It was an American flag with the words Second Amendment Protected printed in gold letters beneath. He nodded, opened one of the two sets of double doors, and stepped in. Immediately, a smile came to his lips as he heard the sound of music and children cheering and people laughing. The smells were of familiar foods, hot dogs and burgers and sweets. Maybe he'd get a meal out of it. Rose looked up at him as he entered, and she smiled at him, and it made him feel like he lifted up off the floor. Sorry, I had to plug my phone in. She smiled at him, and it made him feel like he lifted up off the floor. Wow. When was the last time that happened? He couldn't even remember. He approached her. Well, hello again, Jericho Jones, Rose said with a warm smile. It's nice to see you, Rose, he answered. She frowned and rolled her eyes, making him laugh. Jericho, this is Melena Apple, Rose said. Lena shook his hand. Hello. His brow wrinkled. Apple? As in the owner of Apple Martial Arts? She smiled. I'm married to Master Apple's son. He nodded. Oh, the Marine, right? Yes. Do you know them? John Apple was at one of my meetings today. So what kind of meetings are you having? Rose asked, not meaning to be intrusive, but also meaning exactly that. I mean, it looks like you're wearing a military uniform. He laughed. Well, it's not military. I'm going to be developing a new program for the paramedics and firefighters. Really? That's interesting. So who do you work for exactly? I work for myself. I'm a consultant for emergency services, firemen mostly. I teach special operations for firefighters. Oh, like smoke jumpers or wildland firefighters, Lena asked. He nodded. Like that, but different. Ours includes handling that and more, like special rescues in tight places, or underwater, or with enemy fire, or combatant situations. It's like if you took a military special forces guy and taught him how to fight fires and perform special rescues. Well now, Rose began. That is impressive. He smiled. They are needed skills these days. And since I have the skills, I decided to start my own company. And I'm here in Pine Forest because Pine County is the fastest growing county in the state of Georgia, and Pine Forest is the fastest growing town, and your mayor and city town council are looking into making the area as safe as possible. So in other words, you're here to retrain our fire department. To oversee the training, yes. And where does my father-in-law come in? Lena asked. Well, John Apple is a huge asset to this town and is going to help in the training. Wow, Rose said. That's pretty exciting. He nodded. I'm looking forward to getting started, but first I have to find living arrangements for the guys and myself. Well, that's going to be a tough one, Rose said. Apparently there are a lot of people trying to buy up real estate in Pine Forest, thanks to Gabe Tanner, but I'll keep an eye and ear out for something. I understand there's a new motel going up, he said. That would be my family, Lena said, but it won't be ready until next year. His brow wrinkled. I thought it was being built by a woman named Lisa Stewart. Lena smiled. Well, actually, by Lisa Stewart and John and Jody Apple, and they are all my family. Rose grinned. Lisa Stewart is Lena's mom. Well, you are quite the influential person in this town, aren't you? Jericho said. Lena giggled. Yeah, right. I'm just a down-home girl. Do you know Gabe Tanner? Oh, I'm his biggest fan, Rose snorted. Jericho, would you like me to show you around and have you eaten? Yes and no. Great. Then we'll grab a plate first. Hold on just a second. She pulled out her phone and called Daisy. Hey, sis, can I get you to come man the front desk until I get back? I'm going to show our new special operations firefighter around the building. Thanks, sweetie. A minute later, Daisy came hurrying up the corridor, her eyes opening wide at the sight of the large man. She smiled. Daisy, this is Jericho Jones. Jericho, one of my sisters. Daisy. He held out his hand. Wow, you two look a lot alike. Rose grinned. Yes, we do. Daisy, thanks for helping out. I won't be too long. Take your time, Daisy purred, making Rose roll her eyes. New scene. Rose eyed the plates of food in front of Jericho. 2 hot dogs, loaded, 1 hamburger, a mound of fries covered with ketchup, 3 cupcakes, and a Snickers bar. They sat at one of the large tables set up on one side of the gym. She watched him as he briefly closed his eyes before he ate. She was pretty sure he'd blessed his food, and that made her smile. Not that she was that interested in him. He was definitely a good-looking man, but he was here to do a job, and then he'd leave, and she wasn't interested in another long-distance relationship with anybody, even if he was cute, and prayed before he ate. Though it was a big upgrade from Mike Moreland's attitude toward God. He took a huge bite of one of the hot dogs and smiled at her, nodding his head as he chewed and swallowed. That hits the spot. Thanks for dinner, Rose. She grinned. You're welcome. Though really it's compliments of Gabe Tanner. So, are you really going to eat all that? I was. I haven't eaten since breakfast. Why? Do you want something? Rose said as she looked over his 2 plates. I'll take a fry, she said, as she lifted one from his plate. I mean, it's hard to watch someone eat a plate of greasy French fries covered in ketchup and not steal at least 1 fry. He nodded with a grin. Right? Hey, mister. Rose and Jericho turned to smile at a boy about 6 or 7 years old who tapped on Jericho's arm. Hello there, Jericho said. The boy smiled. Are you a soldier? No, I'm a firefighter. The boy's eyes opened wide. Oh, did you bring your fire truck? Sorry, I don't have a fire truck. Why not? Well, because the fire trucks belong to the town, not to the firemen. Devin's dad brought his fire truck to school once. Well, it wasn't his fire truck. He had to get special permission to bring it to school so that he could show all the students all about the fire truck. Oh, so do you know Devin's dad? No, but I bet I'm going to be meeting him soon. Cool. Well, bye. Rose laughed as the boy turned and ran back to his friends. I guess the conversation was over. Jericho smiled. Guess so. So tell me, Rose began, what other fire departments have you taught? He smiled. My credentials are extensive. She shrugged. Name one. Well, we just finished working with the Savannah FD. Before that, we were in Birmingham, Alabama. Before that, Knoxville, Tennessee. Before that, Fulton County here in Georgia. And the list goes on. How long do you stay in each place? About 3 months. She nodded. All those places you named, they're fairly large places compared to Pine County. How can we afford you? He grinned. You can't. But I reached out to the mayor of Pine Forest and offered a discounted rate. Why? I felt led to do so. Led by whom? By God. Rose smiled. I like that. Well, that's good to hear. Why? It's always good to fellowship with the saints. She smiled and picked up one of his cupcakes. He eyed it but didn't say anything. She smiled at him. I'll get you another one. That's okay, I'll share. I mean, since you fed me for free. Aw, how sweet, she said with a giggle as she peeled the paper away from the cake and took a bite. Jericho watched the beautiful blonde as she licked frosting off her upper lip. This girl was about as sexy as a girl could be, and he wondered if she was doing it on purpose or just not aware of how appealing she was. Her eyes were the brightest blue he'd ever seen. Her lashes were dark. Her lips were pink, though she wore no lipstick. Her skin was smooth, flawless, really. A little turned-up nose made her look childlike. Her smile was bright and full of mischief. Her blonde hair looked to be natural, not bleached, and he figured he was right about that since her sister Daisy also had bright blonde hair, though Daisy's was long. Rose's hair came just barely past her shoulders. She had on a simple orange t-shirt that had Gabe Tanner Community Center on the front. So why did she look so darn sexy? Rose pulled out her phone and checked the time. Well, let's take a quick tour. Violet and her gang give us a performance I'm sure that you... Well, let's take a quick tour before Violet and her gang give us a performance I'm sure that you won't want to miss. Violet, another sister? She nodded. Yep. Rose, Daisy, Violet. I'm seeing a pattern here. Very good. Big, handsome, and smart. His eyes opened in surprise. You think I'm handsome? Don't go getting all full of yourself. You're not the only one I think that about. He grinned. Yes, ma'am. Believe me, I don't take myself too seriously. They rose, cleared their places, and headed down toward the classrooms. Kids in costumes were running from door to door. Each door was decorated with things that represented fall. Cornfields and pumpkins and leaves and scarecrows and sunflowers. There were also some superhero doors and angels and barnyard animals and turkeys made from handprints and deer and squirrels gathering nuts. The kids were screaming and running and having a blast, and everyone had a huge bag or a plastic pumpkin filled to the brim. The volunteers opening the doors were making the kids answer questions before they got their candy. I noticed that you accomplished your goal of no witches or goblins or vampires. Rose nodded. Well, this center has to represent certain beliefs. Gabe is a devout Christian. He wouldn't want to be represented by blood and gore and demons and devils and occult type things. This center tonight is not really a celebration of Halloween, but an alternative to Halloween. Our family has always been allowed to trick or treat, but we were always good things like angels or kittens or silly things like robots or a teapot. Nothing really that is associated with evil. But we don't look down on those who celebrate Halloween. Mostly they do it innocently. We just try to set a good example of how things can be handled in an uplifting or more wholesome kind of way, and don't invite the demons into our lives. She turned and led him back toward the gym. He nodded. Impressive. And do you run the center or do you just work here? I manage the center. We just opened it officially last week. So, would you be insulted if I asked your age because you look like you're in high school? She smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. I'm 23. I'm about to be 24 in a few months. I just graduated college with a degree in business management. Would you be insulted if I asked your age? Not at all. I'm 28. She nodded. And how long have you been a firefighter? Firefighter. Since I graduated from high school, or since I was 18. She stopped walking and poked a finger at his chest. And what are all these badges about? Well, they're things I'm qualified and certified to teach. Not all of the things, but they represent some of them. Okay, tell me that one, she said, as she put a fingertip on a blue badge with a giant wave on it. That one is for special water operations, flood, swift water, and white water. And how about that one that also looks like water with a red crab-looking thing in it? He looked down with a smile. That's a scuba diver, not a crab. That's a master scuba diving badge. Ooh, a master. How about this one? He looked down and lifted her finger so he could see which badge she pointed to. That's Marine Search and Rescue. He pointed to the one beside it. That's Land Search and Rescue. That's Tower Rescue. That's Extrication. That's Master EMT. That's Confined Space. That's Trench Rescue. That's High Angle Rescue. That's Airports, Subways, Hazardous Material. And that's Hotshot Firefighter. He pointed to the badge on his left shoulder. And that one is Master of Special Operations Firefighter. That's pretty impressive. He sighed. I've been at it for 10 years. 10 years and you're already teaching other people. I mean, doesn't it take a long time just to make chief? It could take 10 or more years to become a chief, and I have what it takes. Everything except the ability to compromise my ethics for political gains. I knew I had great leadership qualities. I knew I could learn, become certified, and in many cases become a master in everything a firefighter could do. I put in my time in the trenches and finally struck out on my own. I set a good example. I practice what I preach, and I chose a few guys to work with in my company, and we've come a long way very fast. Again, impressive. And here we are back in the gym. She pointed toward the piano. And that's Violet. He looked at the girl at the piano and back at Rose and back at Violet and back at Rose again. She's your twin? Rose smiled. Yes. She's the yin, and I am definitely the yang. He laughed. Okay. We'll use a different analogy because I'm not sure if yin is a good one or if yang is. She smiled. Let's see. Violet is the sweet, and I'm the sour. He nodded. Got it. He looked over at Violet again. She was the exact replica of Rose, except her hair was very long. She was playing the piano beautifully as kids and parents and community helpers were all ushering into the gym and sitting on the floor in a huge semicircle. Rose grabbed his arm and ushered him forward. Violet looked up as he approached, and she smiled, stopped playing, and stood. Violet, this is Jericho Jones, Rose said. Violet offered her hand. Hello, she said sweetly. It's nice to meet you. He nodded. You as well. Usually people say, so-and-so has told me so much about you, but I must admit, Rose told me nothing about you. Violet laughed. Oh, she's like that sometimes. She keeps her hand close to the vest. He nodded. I see. And so, Violet, do you help Rose manage this place? No, I'm in school studying music, but I'll help out when I can, especially when it comes to musical type things, like tonight, where the children will sing a few songs about fall and Thanksgiving and family. I can't wait. Rose smiled. You're welcome to take one of the seats in the back or over there on the bleachers. It's time for me to go to work. He nodded and headed to the back, but instead of sitting, he stood against a wall. Rose walked to the front of the large group of children all sitting on the floor. Hello, everyone, she said brightly, and welcome to the Gabe Tanner Community Center. I'm Rose Anderson. As I'm sure almost all of you already know, and I'm the manager of this facility. We are in need of volunteers and some employees, so please go to our website and check it out, she said. She directed towards their parents. GabeTannerCommunityCenter.com. You can also access our website from the Pine Forest Town website and from GabeTanner.com. Just a note for the parents here real quick. You may have seen our big banner out front for the grand opening. That grand opening is a month-long affair and will include all kinds of activities for the kids and families, including a feeding of the homeless on Thanksgiving Day. So make sure you check it out on the website, see if you can help with any of the things we might need, and join us if you can. Gabe is coming home to join us, and I know a lot of people who are looking forward to that. She paused and looked around and nodded at Daisy. Are we live? Daisy nodded with a smile. We've been live for a while, Rose continued. Okay, so we have a treat, not a trick, for you all tonight. I happen to know that the children in our little county from Pine Forest Elementary, Brookwood Elementary, Creekside Elementary, and Crossroads Elementary have a great talent for singing. And tonight, in gratitude for the parents all allowing the children to come here and spend their evening with us, they're going to sing 3 songs for you. Our own Violet Anderson has worked with them extensively over the past few weeks, and I am blown away by what she's done with them. I'm going to help out a bit so Violet can play the piano. Okay, children, those who are singing for us tonight, please quietly rise and come to the risers up front. There was immediate chaos. Hey, Rose said loudly. What part of quietly don't you understand? Everyone laughed. As the children found their way to their places, the place grew quiet again. Jericho watched as Rose commanded the attention of about 40 elementary school children, from little 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds. They all got still and quiet as Rose stood in front of them, and Jericho realized Rose was going to direct them in the songs. She had some index cards in her hand, and she glanced at Violet, who nodded at her, and then looked at the children and nodded at the group with a smile. One of the older boys stepped forward to one of the 3 microphones that were placed in front of the risers. He cleared his throat. Our first song is because we're thankful for our town and our country, because we're free to assemble together like we are tonight. The boy's face reddened as he went back to his place on the risers. Violet played an intro, and Rose conducted, and the children sang America the Beautiful, and they sang it surprisingly well. Even the little ones seemed to know the words. At the end, some of the children broke out in harmony, and when they finished, they received a great deal of applause. When the audience quieted, Rose nodded, and a girl stepped down from the risers and to the microphone and stood on her tiptoes. Our next song is because we are thankful for our families. Some of us have large families. Some of us have small families. But here at the Gabe Tanner Center, we are all one big family. She smiled and went back to her place on the riser. The piano began to play, and the children began to sway as 3 children stepped down, 2 boys and a girl, one at each mic. The first boy began to sing. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain. We all have sorrow. The girl sang next. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. The entire group came in on the chorus, loud and strong, taking everyone's breath away. The third boy came in after the chorus with an amazing, soulful voice. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can fill those of your needs that you won't let show. And then the group, including the 3 soloists, started clapping their hands and sang in crescendo. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. Sing with me. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Jericho was blown away. How in the world did these 2 sisters get these kids to sing like this in only a few weeks? It was phenomenal. He was mesmerized as he watched the rest of the song and gave a few quick whistles during the ovation they received. The place quieted, waiting to see what the third number would be. When Rose had said the children were going to sing a few songs for their parents, he thought it would be children's songs, something about a pumpkin or sunshine or something like that. He couldn't wait to see what they would do as a finale. 3 little ones stepped forward, and an older girl took one of the mics out of the stand and held it out to the first little one, a girl. Our last song is to say thank you to God. She then moved the mic to a little boy. We are grateful for this world. She moved it to the last little one, another girl. And God has the whole world in his hands. The children went back to their places and they swung into a resounding rendition of the whole world in his hands, including all of the hand motions that accompany the song. At the end, the children received a giant standing ovation. Violet stood and Rose thanked her and commended the children on a job well done. She looked straight at the camera that Daisy was using to live stream. And thank you also to all of our online viewers who couldn't be with us in person, sending our love out to everyone. And for now, good night from the Gabe Tanner Community Center. If you'd like to set up your own Gabe Tanner Center in your community, contact us at gabetanner.com. It's a wrap. Children, you are dismissed to go find your parents. The place was a madhouse as parents found their children and began gathering their buckets and bags of candy and their jackets, or stood around chatting and getting pictures and commending all the children on their performances. Jericho stood aside watching Rose be congratulated on a wonderful evening, as well as Violet for the musical feat she pulled off. He was impressed. With everything, he'd felt he needed to come to Pine Forest, and he was impressed with everything. He'd felt he needed to come to Pine Forest, and he was discovering that it was indeed a special place. He, too, wanted to congratulate the sisters on a job well done, so he waited until most everyone had left. Rose, Violet, and Daisy were standing together when another young lady walked up and hugged them. Surprisingly, she looked exactly like Daisy. Another set of twins? He moved forward. Rose smiled at him as he approached. So, weren't the children amazing? He nodded. I was blown away, really. I did not expect to be so thoroughly entertained. What you did, it was amazing. Oh, I didn't do it. It was all Violet. She's been working with the kids for weeks. She had to play the piano, though, and she felt like the kids needed someone to look at, to direct them. Violet promised me all I had to do was stand in front, smile pretty, and wave my arms around. And that is all I did. She did a little more than that, Violet put in. Don't let Rose's humility fool you, Daisy said. She knows she's all that. Lily giggled. So, Lily, Rose began, let me introduce you to Jericho Jones. He's in town to fix our first responders. Lily smiled and offered her hand. It's nice to meet you, Jericho, Lily said. Cool name. He smiled. Thanks. I get that a lot. So, are you another twin? Yes, we have 2 sets of twins in our family so far. So far? Lily nodded. Our mom is pregnant with twins right now. Rose! They all turned at the sound of a child screaming Rose's name. Jericho watched as a little girl with long, silky, dark hair and big blue eyes came running across the gym, her arms open wide. Rose scooped her up. There's my little flower, Rose said with glee. How's my Iris doing? I got candy, Rose laughed. I bet you did. Daddy says I can't eat any more tonight. I bet he did. Rose bounced Iris on her hip, and Iris looked up at Jericho. Hi, she said. Jericho smiled. His size usually made little kids scared, but this tyke wasn't a bit shy. Well, hello there, Iris. Another sister? He asked Rose. She grinned. How'd you guess? Rose watched as her father approached. He hugged and kissed Violet first. Well done, sweetheart, he said softly, then hugged and kissed Rose. You're doing a great job, and you waved your arms very well. Rose laughed. Thanks, Dad. She glanced up at Jericho. Dad, I'd like you to meet Jericho Jones. He's in town to teach our emergency medical services workers to up their game. Jericho, this is my father, Keegan Tanner. Jericho looked her father directly in the eyes and shook his hand. Sir, it's nice to meet you. Rose has been very kind to invite me here tonight and make me feel welcome in your town. Keegan nodded. It's nice to meet you, too. I've actually already heard about you and what you're doing here in Pine Forest. Of course you have, Daddy, Daisy said with a laugh. Iris scrambled down out of Rose's arms and went running to see someone else across the room. Jericho turned his attention to Rose's father, his brow furrowed. So, your name is Keegan Tanner? But Rose, your name is Anderson? Rose nodded with a smile. Our father, our biological father, died in Iraq shortly after Vi and I were born, and actually before Lily and Daisy were born. She grabbed Keegan's arm and leaned her head on it in a loving gesture. This man came into our lives when I was 4. He married our mother and became the best father a girl could ever ask for. Keegan patted her hand. And they are the best daughters. Jericho smiled. Well, they are definitely the most beautiful. But let me ask, if your name is Tanner, are you related to Gabe Tanner? Keegan nodded. He's my son and their brother. Jericho looked at Rose. Why didn't you tell me he's your brother? She smiled sweetly. You didn't ask. Well, you didn't ask me. You asked Lena if she knew him. He nodded, beginning to understand. I didn't ask you because I figured you knew him since he was allowing you to manage his center. Rose laughed. Allowing me? He was grateful to have someone who understands him volunteer to take the job. Well, I stand corrected. So, Violet said you keep things close to the vest. I guess she wasn't kidding. It's something she learned from me, Keegan offered. There's no need to go giving your life story out to everyone you meet. Rose smiled. My daddy runs Ameritech Security. Jericho's mouth opened. For some reason, I thought Gabe Tanner's father was an FBI agent. I was once, Keegan said, like almost 20 years ago. And I don't run Ameritech. Jason Lee and Joey Adams do that. I run a division of Ameritech. Well, Mr. Tanner, let me just say that it is a real honor to meet you. Your son is an amazing young man, and I have a great deal of admiration and respect for him and for the people who raised him. He's an inspiration. Keegan nodded. He can be. He's a good kid. But he's fallible, as are we all. Jericho heaved a sigh. Don't I know it? He looked around at the group. So, where is he now? He's in California, staying with the Kenos, training to fight in a tournament a week from tomorrow. The Kenos as in Ricky Keno, right? I know he's dating their daughter. Keegan nodded. Yes. He glanced at Rose, who was looking up at Jericho with admiration in her eyes, and he knew they were beginning a new episode in their lives. At that moment, Violet turned to see her guy walking up to the group, holding her little sister. He smiled at her, looking into her eyes and letting her know he was very happy to see her. What did you do with those kids, Vi? You were amazing. No, what you did with those kids, Vi. You were amazing. Were you here? No, but I pulled over and watched it live stream. You're so talented. Violet smiled and offered her cheek for him to kiss, since her father was standing right there. She turned to introduce him to the newcomer in the town, but was silenced by his words. CJ? Jericho said. CJ Blackman turned and looked at the man who called his name. His face visibly paled. He didn't smile. He handed Iris over to Violet. JJ, he answered flatly. Jericho smiled brightly. CJ, man, it's so good to see you. What are you doing here in Pine Forest? He offered his hand. CJ sighed heavily and didn't shake it. I live here. I work for Ameritech, he said, nodding toward Keegan. And I just stopped in real quick to see Violet, but I just remembered I have some reports I have to file. If you'll all excuse me, he turned and walked away. The group watched him leave. Violet's mouth was open in surprise, not knowing what to think. Everyone turned their eyes to Jericho. He was still looking after CJ, watching him as he exited the gym. He looked back at everyone staring at him. Sighing, he realized they were all waiting for an explanation. Well, that was a surprise, he said. A blast from the past, I think they say. No one said anything. He blew out a breath. Well, CJ and I, we grew up together. I mean, in the same neighborhood, up in Rome, Georgia. He didn't seem too happy to see you, Rose pointed out. Jericho's brow furrowed. No, he didn't, did he? We lost touch with each other right after we graduated from high school. We'd been best friends. He didn't appear too friendly now, Daisy said. I don't understand, Jericho said. But I intend to find out. Did you two have a fight or something? Violet asked, her voice shaky. Jericho shook his head. No, I mean, we didn't fight. However, something did happen, but if you all don't know about it, I guess he doesn't want you to know about it. So I guess I need to shut up now. He glanced up at Mr. Tanner, who wasn't smiling, and he had a feeling that he did know something. Jericho took a step back. Well, I guess I'd better be off. I have an early start scheduled for tomorrow. He held out his hand to Keegan. It was a pleasure meeting you, sir, and your daughters. Keegan nodded and shook his hand. Nice to meet you, too. I'm sure we'll meet again soon. Jericho nodded and shook each girl's hand, saving Rose for last. Finally, he turned and took her hand. Thank you, Rose, for inviting me tonight. I had a great time, and I really enjoyed you waving your arms. She laughed. You're welcome. Come by the center any time. Thank you. I just might do that. He turned abruptly and took his leave. The family watched him go and then turned to Violet. Are you okay, honey? Rose asked. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I guess so. I don't understand what happened. He didn't even say goodbye to me. He was surprised and flustered by seeing Jericho, Keegan said. Don't take it personally. Remember, you asked me about his past? Well, it's come back to haunt him. Give him a chance to explain. Something did happen. But CJ wasn't in the wrong, and as far as I know, neither was Jericho, though I have some investigating to do. Can't you just tell me, Dad? Violet asked. I've already told you, Violet. He works for me. His past is confidential. I cannot breach protocol. But you could tell me about Jericho, right? Rose answered. Keegan smiled at his smart daughter. I have no problem doing that. I'll get back to you. Now, let's get this place cleaned up and locked up and go home. Rose nodded. The kitchen manager has the kitchen about done, and Ms. Murphy, with Lucas and Charlie and Matt Stewart, have already seen to all the classrooms, taken out the trash, locked all the doors, put up all the tables and chairs out of here, and gone home. So I just need to do a walk and make sure we haven't missed anything on my checklist. Keegan smiled. You have a closing checklist. You're being very professional about this, aren't you? Dad, you know I don't do anything halfway. And you know this first community center for Gabe, it's part of his legacy. and it has to go off without a hitch. Keegan nodded. I love the way you protect your brother. I'm proud of you, Rosie. Rose smiled. The feeling is mutual. And that is the end of chapter 12.